In Boston, we're at the site of the Boston Tea Party. Now, this was known as Griffin's Wharf, and actually Griffin's Wharf is what was behind me here in the actual shot. But on December 16th, 1773, you basically had the start of what a lot of people consider the American Revolution, the Boston Tea Party. So let's go take a look. When the Boston Tea Party event occurred, it had actually been building for some time. The event's going to take place on December 16, 1773, but what is known before that is that there were a series of meetings held in Boston. Now, why were these meetings held? Well, the Tea Act had been passed, and the Tea Act had been passed to basically try to help the East India Company with their profits. And tea, being the #1 drink in the colonies at the time, was an easy target to be taxed. So at the Old South Meeting House in Boston, there was a series of meetings that were held, and it led up to the events of December 16, 1773. Basically, the meetings that had been held prior to that were talking about what could be done, legally what could be done. And then inside, you might have had some sort of a plan that was being developed, maybe secretly, because remember, this is an illegal act. So what you're having happen is, as these meetings are taking place and as they're trying to find some sort of a solution to the tea tax problem, you have this brewing momentum that culminates in December 16, 1773 with the actual event of the Boston Tea Party. That day, there had been a basically all-day meeting at the South Meeting House. And in that meeting, they were trying to get some solution to the tea problem. Send the tea back, don't let it be actually shipped off the boat into Boston, because then it would immediately be taxed. So what they had to do was come up with some solution. By the end of the evening, right around 6, 7 o'clock, it became clear there was going to be no solution to this problem. And the tea on December 16th had to be basically taken off of the Dartmouth and put on the harbor, which means it's going to be taxed. There were 3 ships involved: the Dartmouth, the Eleanor, and the Beaver. All of them had tea in their holds. The colonists knew this. So once it became clear on December 16th that there was going to be no viable solution, you had about 100 colonists led by the Sons of Liberty come down here, quite an organized event, and they come onto these ships, 3 ships total: Dartmouth, the Beaver, and the Eleanor. And what they do is they go down into the cargo holds, grab 340 crates of tea. Now, this had to be an organized event. This isn't something that you would do on a whim. So you had people down in the cargo holds who knew how to get the tea up into this area here on the deck of the ship. You had people on the deck of the ship, maybe with pickaxes, that are knocking the crates open to dump the tea overboard. And this is an organized activity. So this is something that had been planned. So don't think that they just ran down here and said, well, what do we do now once they got to the ship? Not at all. You have to bring it from down below up to here and then dump it overboard. Now, when that's happening, the whole time, one, they're dressed as Mohawk Indians. A lot of people think that was to basically disguise themselves. They didn't want people to know who they were because, again, this is an illegal act. And when you come onto these ships, technically you're trespassing, and then you're destroying property and dumping it. This is very illegal. You could get into serious trouble because of this. And they dumped 340 crates of tea overboard, 90,000 pounds. Estimated that it was 2 million cups of tea, just to put it into perspective. When they're doing that, not only are they sending a signal to the British Crown about the taxes, and not only are they taking matters into their own hands and risking their own safety and maybe their own freedom as well, but you have 100 colonists who come down here for 3 hours. So don't think that it was 10 minutes. It was 3 hours, 3 ships, dumping all of that tea overboard in defiance, knowing the whole time that there was a possibility that you could wind up maybe going to jail, maybe worse, depending what they would want to do to you at that point. So when you think of the Boston Tea Party and coming onto a ship like this, one, you had to have knowledge of the ship. Somebody had to know what to do once you got on here. Where were the things located? How did you know where to get to them? How did you bring them up to the deck? They're heavy. So if 340 crates, you better have some sort of a system ready to go. Who's in charge? Everybody coming onto the ship and just doing what they want, or do we have stations? All of that was the pre-planning of the actual event that took place on these ships. Very organized, 3 hours, 100 colonists, and you're taking matters into your own hands and at the same time risking your own freedom. So a lot of people think an act like this, that it's an act of defiance saying we're not putting up with this any longer. So that's really what we're talking about when we look at the Boston Tea Party. We're talking about a lot of tea. Over 90,000 pounds of tea are dumped in the harbor. Today's value, over $1.5 million. So this isn't something that would be overlooked or something that would be looked at as, well, it was the colonists being upset, we understand. Not even close. The Coercive Acts will be passed in 1774 by the British, which really basically punish the citizens of Boston for this event. For instance, the Boston Harbor was closed. You couldn't, basically, if you were a British officer, you could not be, or a British official, you could not be charged with a crime in the Massachusetts colonies. Meetings were restricted. Gee, I wonder why. Why would they suddenly start to restrict town meetings? Well, it's because of this event. So this is a trigger. This is one of those triggers you talk about when it comes to emotion, when it comes to actually putting actions behind words. The words came first through the meetings, but then on the night of December 16th, 1773, those words took action in the form of the Boston Tea Party. So when we talk about the Boston Tea Party, we talk about events like this, really what you're doing, it's gutsy. You have to have the guts to be able to actually put yourself on the line and make a statement like this. Meetings are one thing. You can have a meeting and you can talk and you can say things at a meeting, but then doing something like this and you're taking that into your hands that, okay, I'm willing to risk my own freedom in order to get something much bigger that I think is deserved, possibly for the colonies, which would later, of course, turn into the country.